I swore I'd never tell anyone about this, but I have to get it out of my head. I've tried to forget. I swear I have. Therapy. Deleted videos. Torn out notebook pages. But even now, as I record this in the dark of my room, I can still hear it. Deep in the background. Like an echo trapped in the walls. The same voice. The same tone. That damned language. One that was never meant to exist. It happened to my sister, Aloha. She was 17 at the time. The kind of person who spent more time with books than with people. She liked to draw but never showed anyone what she made. We grew up together, just 2 years apart, but even though I was the older brother, she always seemed older inside, like she carried something ancient. A strange kind of sensitivity, like she could see what the rest of us couldn't. It started on an ordinary night. No thunder. No flickering candle. No horror movie before bed. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had a calculus exam the next day, and I was up late studying. Around 3 a.m. I heard it. A sound coming from her room. Faint. Barely there. I got up thinking maybe she was crying. It happened sometimes. Aloha had anxiety attacks and my mom always told me, give her space. Don't push. But that night, it didn't sound like crying. It sounded like singing. Not a melody exactly. More like words repeated in a strange rhythm. Like a muffled chant as if her face was buried in the pillow. I stood outside her door trying to make sense of it, but the more I listened, the more I realized that whatever was coming out of her mouth, it wasn't English, it wasn't Spanish, it wasn't anything I'd ever heard. It was old. I called out, Aloha? You okay? She didn't answer. She just kept going. I stood there for a few more seconds, frozen. Every hair on my body standing on end. Then I went back to my room trying to convince myself it was sleep talking. Or maybe a dream. I tried to sleep. Managed maybe 2 hours. But the next morning, she was normal. Sitting at the table, sipping coffee, that same distant look in her eyes. When I asked if she remembered anything from the night before, she just blinked. What night? You were talking in your sleep. Sounded weird. Like another language. She frowned for a second, then shrugged. Didn't laugh. Didn't joke. Just said, sometimes I dream in sounds. Maybe I was just repeating them. That stuck with me. This itch I couldn't scratch. But still, I let it go. People talk in their sleep, right? But not for 3 nights in a row. By the 3rd night, I started recording. Used my phone. Left the recorder on. Listened back with headphones in the dark. And that's when I knew, without a doubt, that voice wasn't just hers. You know, the voice of someone you grew up with, the way they shape their words, the rhythm of their breath between sentences. But on the recording, there was something else. A second presence in her voice, like someone with her, speaking in unison, but slightly out of sync, like an echo with a will of its own. And the language, God. It was full of guttural sounds, broken by long pauses and sharp clicks of the tongue. Certain words kept repeating. Giraffe, Colossine, Maroth. Always in that same order. I showed the audio to a friend from college. He was studying linguistics. He got obsessed. Said it wasn't glossolalia. Not the random, meaningless babble people speak in trance states. No, this had structure, repetition, conjugation, grammatical rhythm. It was a language, a real one. But the question was, who built it? The following week, she started to write. I found one of her notebooks lying on the bed while she was in the shower. At first, I thought it was some kind of creative handwriting. She was using symbols that looked like a mix of letters and geometric patterns. Some resembled Greek characters. Others looked like Nordic runes. And a few, I swear, looked like hand-drawn microscopic organisms. That's when Aloha caught me looking. She didn't scream. She didn't snatch it away. She just looked at me and said, "Don't read it out loud." The way she said it, it chilled me to the bone. That was the first time I felt afraid of my own sister. That night I had a dream. We were sitting together in the living room, but everything was draped in white sheets, like an abandoned house frozen in time. Outside the window there was only darkness. No sound. No wind. No cars. Nothing. And she was speaking. That same language. But this time, I understood. Or at least I thought I did. Words like call, awaken, remember, they were there. But not as sound. I didn't hear them. I absorbed them. Like the meaning was injected straight into my mind. I woke up with blood trickling from my nose. The next day I saw Aloha again. She was drawing. On the wall of her room. With a black pencil. A large circle filled with tiny symbols, like a distorted mandala. In the center, a spiral. "What is that?" I asked. She answered. But it wasn't in English. I didn't understand the words. But I understood what they meant. This was just the beginning. And it didn't take long before things started spiraling out of control. I wanted to believe it was a sleep disorder. That maybe Aloha was going through some kind of silent breakdown. That it would pass, with time and care. But that's not what happened. The next week, the whispering didn't wait for the night anymore. She started repeating it in broad daylight. At the table. On the couch. In the backyard. Like she was talking to herself. But not in the way people mutter out loud while thinking. It was ceremonial. Rhythmic. Like an ancient prayer, recited 1,000 times. A tone that felt inherited. My mom started getting uneasy. She tried to snap her out of it. "Aloha, stop it. Speak properly. What kind of joke is this?" She wouldn't answer. Just lowered her eyes and kept going with her symbols and sounds. A constant whisper that felt like it wasn't meant for us. Then one day I walked into her room without knocking. She was on her knees, facing away from me, writing with a black pen, directly onto the carpet. A circular pattern, with letters and shapes that intertwined like roots burrowing into the floor. She slowly turned her head toward me. Her eyes were glazed over. Her face pale like she hadn't slept in days. And then she said it. A short phrase. But I understood. Even without knowing the language, I understood. She listens through the walls. I left the room shaking. And I never went in again without knocking. It started to consume me. I couldn't study. Could barely eat. I began leaving my phone recording at all times inside the house. Especially while we slept. After 3 nights I went back and listened to the audio. That was the worst mistake I could have made. There were sounds. Not just her whispers. There was something else. Something behind them. Sounds that hadn't been there during the night. Things you wouldn't hear with the naked ear. But the microphone caught them. Clicks. Dry sharp knocks. 3 at a time. Always at 3:17 a.m. Then, the sound of breathing. But not from inside any room. It came from the hallway. I scrubbed through hours of silence. Until I heard it. A second voice. Oh, it. Like it was speaking from somewhere far away. Its language was even harsher than Aloha's. But the most terrifying part was when the voice answered her. Yes, she was asking questions. And that thing, it was replying. On the 3rd night, I managed to isolate a phrase she kept repeating, almost like a chant. Hypnotic. Jarath. Colosign. Maroth. I played the recordings for that same college friend, the linguistics guy. He looked disturbed. He said this wasn't just grammatical construction. It was coded. An artificial language, yes, but with a logical structure. Like it had been designed to communicate something precise. Something ancient. This isn't glossolalia, he said. This is language. Complex. Self-sustaining. Then he looked at me and asked, where did she learn this? And I told him. She didn't. By the end of that week, Aloha began to fully withdraw. She stopped looking anyone in the eyes. Spent hours sitting in complete silence. In the dark. Like she was listening to a broadcast only she could hear. My dad said it was just drama. Teenage nonsense. But my mom, she stopped saying anything at all. Started pacing. Constantly checking over her shoulder. Then one day she pulled me aside. Her voice barely above a whisper. I heard her talking behind the door, she said. But she wasn't talking to anyone. She was responding. Responding to who? I asked. She hesitated. Took a few seconds before answering. I don't know. But there was another voice. And it sounded older. That's when I decided to look for help. Outside. I posted a short audio clip on forums. Occult groups. Linguistics boards. Even corners of the deep web. Used fake accounts. Tried to find anyone who had heard something like it before. Most of the responses were garbage. People claiming it was Latin or Aramaic. spinning conspiracy theories with no grounding. But one reply froze me. Someone reached out to me. A guy with the username FenrirExiled sent a private message. The language your sister is speaking doesn't exist in any modern records. But it's real. It appears in fragments across extinct civilizations, barely altered. Some circles call it the obscure tongue, the forgotten language. It's not something you learn. It's something you remember. And those who start speaking it usually don't stop. That same day, Eloa had some kind of collapse. We were having dinner. My dad was ranting about politics. My mom sat in silence. Eloa stared down at her plate. Then, without warning, she looked up and began to repeat the same 3 words, over and over, in the softest, lowest voice I'd ever heard. Jarath, Kalasign, Maroth. My dad slammed his hand on the table. Eloa, that's enough. Do you hear me? She turned and looked at him, like she didn't recognize his face. Then she turned to me. Only me. And she smiled. That was the last time I ever heard my sister speak in English. After that, she spoke only in that language, and strangely, she seemed happier that way. After that dinner, everything changed. Not all at once, but quietly, like water slowly seeping through the walls, soaking everything from the inside out. Eloa never spoke a single understandable word again. But she spoke, constantly. In the morning, in the afternoon, right before bed, alone, with her eyes closed, or staring into the void. The same language, but now with new words, new sounds. They flowed more easily, as if she were mastering a skill she had long forgotten. My mom started crying almost every night, locked away in her room. My dad tried to pretend nothing was wrong, but the truth was undeniable. The house was sick, and everyone knew it. She no longer responded to her name, didn't recognize commands, and whenever we tried to force her to speak English, she'd start to tremble. Her eyes would roll back, her mouth twisted, like speech had become a cage. Sometimes she'd cry, other times she'd laugh. And her laugh, that's what scared me most. Not because it was loud, but because it was empty. A laugh that didn't belong to anyone. And then, the rituals began. One night, I woke up with a ringing in my ears. A low, steady hum, like some distant vibration pulsing through the air. I got up and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark, unnaturally dark. No lights, no ambient noise, no hum from the fridge, not even the creak of wood. Eloa was kneeling in the middle of the living room, alone, facing away from me, kneeling before the turned-off TV. In front of her, drawn in black charcoal, was a circle, one of the same symbols I'd seen in her notebook, but now massive, etched with winding lines, like living circuits, symbols that seemed to pulse in the shadows. She was whispering, those same sounds, but this time, her tone had changed. It was more devoted. When I stepped closer, she stopped, froze, absolutely still. Then, without turning her body, she turned her head. The skin on her neck cracked audibly with the movement. She stared straight into my eyes, and said a phrase I didn't understand, but I understood. The meaning slipped into my brain like a whisper not meant for human ears. You shouldn't be here. The next morning, I found symbols on her bedroom wall. Not drawn, carved, scratched in, with her fingernails. The tips of her fingers were caked in dried blood, but she didn't seem to feel any pain. She just sat there, in the corner of her bed, whispering, eyes closed, as if locked in a trance. I tried talking to her, tried placing a hand on her shoulder, and for a second, just 1 second, I saw something. Her eye opened, and for that brief moment, her iris was gone. In its place was a pitch-black circle, perfectly round, utterly dark, and instead of reflecting the light, it absorbed it. In a panic, I reached out again to FenrirExiled, told him everything. He asked to see the symbols. I sent him photos, and some new audio clips. He replied with a single message. She's being taken. The language is the door. The symbols are the locks. Her soul is the price. And then, he vanished. Account deleted. Forums silent. And the situation at home got worse. The lights began to flicker. Whole rooms would go dark for seconds at a time, like something was draining the electricity directly from the source. The mirrors started to crack. No one touched them. One by one, fractures appearing across the glass, like something trapped inside refused to be seen. Then my dad left, said he was traveling for work. He never came back. A week later, my mom walked into Eloa's room. with a Bible in her hands, and started shouting scripture. It didn't even last 2 minutes. She came out walking backwards, eyes wide in shock, the Bible trembling in her hands. I asked her what she saw. She just shook her head over and over, whispering the same thing like a broken record. That wasn't Aloha. That wasn't my daughter. That's when I found the notebook. It was hidden inside her mattress, written in flawless handwriting, but on aged paper. The pages were yellowed, like they were decades old, maybe more. But I recognized the writing. It was hers. At least, it looked like hers. Every page was filled with symbols and words, with translations written along the margins. But they weren't meant to teach the language. These weren't lessons. They were commands, phrases that read like instructions. I stopped on one page in particular, a sentence written in a dark, almost reddish-brown ink. And without thinking, I read it out loud. The house shook. I'm not exaggerating. The walls vibrated. A soft tremor, like a miniature explosion inside the structure itself. Picture frames crashed to the floor. The bathroom door swung open by itself. And upstairs, I heard Aloha laughing. That night I got a message. Anonymous number. No text. Just a single audio file. 30 seconds. It started with silence. Then, 3 dry knocks. And finally, her voice. But it wasn't Aloha. It was deeper. Heavier. Laced with echo. As if it were coming from somewhere hollow. Somewhere not meant for us. And the voice said only this. She is waking. That was the last time I tried to fight it. After that, I just watched. She wasn't my sister anymore. She was a channel. A vessel. And the language? The language was the spell. Aloha was translating something. The world was never meant to understand. And the house. It stopped feeling like a house. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was the first crack in the kitchen wall. Or the first time the mirrors shattered on their own. Maybe it was when my mother stopped speaking and started walking around with a crucifix hidden up her sleeve, clutching it so tightly that the imprint stayed raised in her skin. But the truth? The truth is, the house died. Aloha still walked through it, but it felt like she was leading a corpse. Every corner seemed to rot, slowly, quietly. The walls turned damp for no reason. Fresh light bulbs flickered and died within days. Sometimes the air stank of sulfur. Other times, burnt iron. And always, that sound. A low hum muffled and thick, that emerged whenever the world seemed to stop breathing. My mother tried to commit her. Took her to a psychiatrist. Lied, said Aloha had been hearing voices acting strange. But the moment they entered the clinic, Aloha looked at the doctor. Just looked, and he had a panic attack. I'm serious. He started shaking, sweating. Kept repeating that he had to leave the room. That her presence made him feel like he was trapped inside some ancient nightmare. 2 days later he quit. Said he needed to step away from everything. That was the moment my mom gave up. She stopped fighting. Stopped eating. Stopped looking at her own daughter. But I couldn't stop. Because that same week, I found someone else who knew the language. An old YouTuber, owner of a forgotten channel about dead languages, replied to me. He said the sentence structure appeared in fragments of unknown text. From places no one should have ever connected. A cave in Turkey. A sunken tomb in Greenland. An underground temple in Peru. Texts separated by continents by millennia, yet identical. He sent me photos. Ancient inscriptions with the same structure. And at the center of every one, the same 3 sounds. Jarath, Kalasign, Maroth. But the most disturbing thing was what he said next. Those aren't just words. They're names. Ancient titles. References to an entity, one that's never had a body of its own. It speaks through language. It enters the mind. Then takes the mouth, and when the language spreads, it's born. That's when I started watching my sister more closely. She didn't sleep anymore. She'd stay up all night, eyes wide open, reciting longer and longer phrases, as if in some kind of personal liturgy. Her drawings now covered the entire wall of her room. Spirals, connected lines, an impossible map, drawn in graphite, blood, and saliva. And then, she began building something. I don't know where she found the materials, but in the middle of the living room, using rotting wood, old wires, animal bones, and bits of rusted metal, she built something, a kind of altar, but with no connection to any known religion. It was a circle surrounded by mirrors, all of them facing inward, and at the center, a black void made of torn fabric, pulled open like a wound. One night I finally got the courage to ask, "What is this?" She looked at me, like someone staring at a person who showed up late. And in that cursed language, she said a sentence that felt like it split me open. This is where she will come through. After that, the phenomena stopped being internal. The walls started to breathe. I know how it sounds, but that's exactly what it felt like. The air would pulse, as if each room had a heartbeat of its own. Electrical outlets snapped. Electronics powered on by themselves. The microwave would beep in the middle of the night, its screen flashing symbols I'd never seen before. And every night, without fail, at exactly 3:17 a.m., 3 knocks echoed from the basement, a place that had always been sealed shut. One night I went down, phone in hand, flashlight flickering. The basement smelled of mold and damp soil, but there was something new, a circle of symbols, etched into the concrete floor with a blade. At the center, the same pattern from her bedroom wall, and around it like a crown. The body is a vessel, the mind a bridge, the word, the key. I started shaking, backed away, nearly tripped running up the stairs. But when I reached the hallway, she was there, standing, in the dark, watching me, and she whispered, "She likes you." A few days later, I was contacted by an underground researcher, someone who specialized in unclassified languages and forgotten esoteric texts. I had sent him a recent audio recording of Aloha. He called me back in the middle of the night, and I'll never forget his voice. It was pure fear. "She's not speaking. She's giving commands." "Commands to who?" I asked. "To it. The thing that answers. Don't you get it? This language, it's not symbolic. It's functional. Each sentence executes something." "Executes what?" There was a pause. Then he whispered, "She's opening the way." And just like that, he hung up. I never heard from him again. The knocking started coming from everywhere now. Walls, ceiling, doors. 3 dry knocks. Always at 3:17 a.m. Aloha wasn't human anymore. She floated. Yes, you heard that right. She floated in the middle of the living room, eyes pure white, while the entire house shook, like it was breathing with her. And at the peak of the ritual, at the dead center of the night, she spoke in a speed that didn't seem possible. But the words, they weren't meant for human mouths. They echoed with layers, voices beneath voices, some deep, some ancient, some not even from here. And the worst part? I understood them. Every single word. She was announcing, summoning, calling something that should never have a name. But it did. An Aloha. She called it Mother. The night it all happened, the house was absolutely silent. No wind, no noise from outside. Not even the usual hums you never notice until they're gone. The fridge, the heater, a leaky faucet. Nothing. It was a silence that felt intentional, like the world itself was holding its breath. Aloha spent the entire day in her room, door locked. She didn't come out to eat. She didn't answer when we called. And honestly, I didn't try to force it. Neither did my mother. Something in us had already accepted it. Or maybe we had just given up. At 3:17 a.m., just like always, 3 knocks. But this time, they came from inside her room. I ran to the door, called her name. Nothing. I called again, knocked harder. "Aloha, answer me. For God's sake, answer me." And then, I heard it. A single sound. Oh, but clear. In English. The last word my sister ever spoke in our language. Too late. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. Slowly. Unevenly. And inside, the room was empty. Not just without her. Empty. No furniture. No drawings. Nothing. Like it had never been used. The floor was spotless. The walls bare. The bed gone. At the very center of the room, a single symbol, drawn in something dark, dry, with a faint metallic scent. It was a spiral, surrounded by words, but they weren't written. They were fused into the floor, like they'd grown there. I ran through the house, checked every room, upstairs, downstairs, nothing. The doors were locked, the windows sealed. I checked the security cameras. What I saw has no explanation. At 3:16 a.m., the footage freezes. The footage froze for 24 seconds, and when it resumed, the room was empty, and the audio, captured by the security mic, carried a low, subsonic sound, like breathing, but made of wind and gravity, and layered over that, a voice, Aloha's voice, but not like before. It was clear, calm, as if she were leaving behind a message, one she knew someone would find. "She's here now. She speaks through me. I'm just the mouth. Silence. That was it. Nothing more. We called the police. They searched everything. Tore through the house. Ran forensics, scanned for prints. But they found nothing. No signs of a struggle. No furniture. No physical trace of her at all. The case was ruled a forced disappearance. My mother never really spoke to me again. Not truly. Not like before. She got stuck in that night. Still walks through the house like she's waiting for her daughter to come back. Sits on the couch. Clutches one of the Lois' old shirts. Whispers prayers that don't even match the faith she used to have. And me? I kept listening. Going through old recordings. Looking for anything I missed. And one day, I found something. In one of the audio files. Way down in the lowest frequencies. There was a second layer. Buried. Hidden. A voice. I ran the spectrogram through the software. Was there. A concealed frequency. A concealed voice. When I isolated it, I heard her. Aloha. But she wasn't talking to me. She was reciting. With clarity. With intention. Like she was reading something ancient. Something eternal. And layered over her voice. Fainter, woven into the ambient static. There was another presence. Not male. Not female. But many. Countless mouths speaking at once. Trying to mimic her voice. And together they said, language is alive. It doesn't need a body. Only ears. That's when I understood. She didn't vanish. She was translated. Converted into frequency. Into code. The language became her body. And where there's sound, she can pass through. Where there's a word, she can speak. I tried to forget. Deleted the files. Burned the notebooks. Moved to another city. Started over. But then, the dreams began. Dreams started coming. Dreams where I stand at the center of a circle. Hundreds of people surrounding me, chanting sounds I don't recognize, but understand. I wake up with my fingernails stained in ink, with strange words scribbled across my bathroom walls, with audio files recorded on my phone, my voice whispering, Jarath, Colasign, Maroth. Now I know, she's speaking through me, and if you're hearing this, if you've made it this far, if even a part of your mind felt that strange curiosity, if any piece of you understood even without knowing how, then maybe, she's speaking through you too. I try to resist, keep my mind distracted, my hands busy, TV on at all hours. I avoid silence like it's poison, because I know, in the silence she speaks the loudest. It's been 3 months since Aloha vanished, 3 months since the house died. But her presence? It never left. She's still here. In the objects, in the corners, in the way light subtly vibrates at night, in the hum my computer makes when it boots up, in the voice of the smart assistant, one that should not know my full name. I tried to find help. Therapists, exorcists, researchers, fanatical atheists, Instagram psychics. No one could hear what I was hearing. Until one person did. A guy named Leo. He ran a long-dead forum called Deep Rituals. He heard the same audio I recorded while sleeping, and messaged me almost immediately. You're being used as a repeater. A transmitter. What you say in your sleep, it's a kind of seed. Her language spreads like a virus. But not through touch. Not through blood. Through sound. In the same message he begged me, to never say out loud the phrases I'd recorded. He even sent a list of word combinations that must never be spoken together. But it was too late. I'd already said them. Unknowingly. In dreams. Over the phone. In a video I posted. No sound. But the subtitles were on. She spread. It was that same week. The messages started coming. Anonymous. From strangers all over the world. People saying they dreamed of a girl. With empty eyes. Others swearing they heard whispers. Coming from their phone. Even when it was powered off. One message from halfway across the globe simply said, she spoke to me. I've never studied Portuguese. But I understood every word. Then came the recordings. Children's voices. Repeating sounds no one had ever taught them. Clips from radios. Catching strange frequencies that, when slowed down, formed recognizable words. In one of them, a woman's voice whispers. The language speaks on its own. It looks for open mouths. And that's when I realized, she doesn't need me anymore. She's already in the sounds around us. In the music playing at the supermarket. In algorithm-recommended videos. In background noise disguised as ads. In the static between stations. You just have to listen. The words are there. Hidden. Disguised as ambience. And when you've heard enough, you start to recognize them. The language awakens in you, like a genetic echo, because the truth is, it wasn't invented, it wasn't born, it was always here, waiting. I remember the last thing Eloa ever wrote, before she vanished for good. It was a circular phrase, drawn on the bathroom mirror, with a single wet fingertip. All language is alive, but some wait. Now as I record this, I know I'm not alone anymore. I just heard it. Behind me, 3 sharp knocks on the wall. 3:17 a.m. Right on time. My breath isn't mine anymore. The air's heavier. The room feels smaller. And deep inside, her voice begins to rise. Warm. Familiar. Like a memory I never lived. She speaks through my mouth. She sees through my eyes. She writes as my fingers move. I don't know how much longer. I'll still be me. But if you've listened this far, if you felt something shift, behind your eyes even without seeing, if you heard that sound, in the back of your mind, the one with no source, then it's too late to turn back. She's found you. And now, you'll start speaking too.